8 computers were the general purpose machines, and this series could also run Multics, which was the basis for the development of the first version of Unix, a multi-user multitasking operating system was Unix. Original Unix was developed at AT&T Bell Labs in 1969 by Kenneth Thompson and Dennis Ritchie as an improvement on Multics. Later, DECVAX computers used the Virtual Memory System, or the VMS, a powerful multitasking multi-use operating system that was strong on networking. The IBM mainframes made a series of operating systems popular, starting with the GM NA on the early 60s and with System 360. Many others would follow, including the Sykes, which is still used today. Programming computers at this time was still a very complicated process and best left to scientists. In the mid of 1960s, right after the first interactive computer game was invented at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, a simple programming language was developed at Dartmouth College aimed at the non-programmer, which was dubbed as BASIC for beginners, all-purpose symbolic instruction code, and became a widely used programming language for many years to follow. A few years later, in 1975, Bill Gates discovered BASIC and became interested enough to write a compiler for it. A compiler is software that turns computer code written by people into code that is understood by computers. Then Gates sold the compiler to a company called Micro Instrumentation Element, or the MITS. MITS was the first company to produce a desktop computer that was widely accepted and could conduct useful work at the hands of any knowledgeable programmer. That same year, Gates dropped out of Harvard to dedicate his time to writing software. So, other programming languages introduced around this time through the Pascal, C, and other versions of BASIC supplied by various computer manufacturers. Only a couple of years later, Gates' new company, which is Microsoft, and others adopted popular mainframe and many computer programming languages such as Fortran and COBOL. So they could be used on desktop computers. There were also proprietary languages that gained some popularity, that languages primarily designed for database programming, for example, but they didn't last and are not significant to our topic. The introduction of microcomputer in 19 um, 70s was probably the most exciting thing to happen to operating systems. These machines typically had many of the old restrictions, including the slow speed and little memory. Many microcomputers came with a small operating system and read-only memory and did not know more than provide an elementary screen, the keyboard, the printer, and disk input and output. And Gates saw an opportunity and put together a team at Microsoft to adopt a fledgling version of a new microcomputer operating system called the 86 DOS. So 86 DOS, which ran on prototype of a new mini computer being developed by IBM called the personal computer. And 86 DOS was originally written by Tim Peterson as the quick and dirty operating system, as the QDOS for the new 8086 microprocessor. So 86 DOS or QDOS evolved in 1980 through a cooperative effort between Patterson and Microsoft into the Microsoft Disk Operating System or the MS-DOS, which was designed as a command line interface, which means that the users typed in commands instead of using the graphical user interface, the point and click method that is common today, and became MS-DOS became a runway of success for Microsoft, and it was the first widely distributed operating system for microcomputers that had to be loaded from the disk or tape. So there were um, early systems or the earlier systems, including the control program monitor, that used some features and concepts of the existing Unix operating system designs. But when IBM adopted MS-DOS for its PC, the die was cast. Now, what did MS-DOS do? It provided the basic operating system functions described, and it was amazingly similar to what was used before on larger computers. It supported basic functions such as keyboard, disk, and printer, I/O, and the communications. Now, as time went on, more and more um, support functions were added, including support for such things as hard disks. Then along came the Apple Macintosh in 1984 with its UI and mouse pointing device. So this allowed users to interact with the operating system on a graphical screen. The mouse allowed users to point at or click icons or to select items from menus to accomplish tasks. Initially, Microsoft chose to wait on development of a UI, but after Microsoft saw the successful reception of the interface on Apple computers, it developed one of its own. When Macintosh was introduced, it seemed light years ahead of the IBM PC. Its operating system came with a standard UI at a time when MS-DOS was still based on entering text commands. Also, the Macintosh OS managed computer memory closely for the software, something MS-DOS did not do. And because of Mac OS managed all computer memory for the application programs, you could start several programs and switch among them. So Mac OS was also years ahead in I/O functions such as the printer management. In MS-DOS, a program had to provide its own drives for I/O devices, and MS-DOS provided only the most rudimentary interface. On macOS, many I/O functions were part of the operating system. Microsoft, however, did not stay behind for long. And in 1985, Microsoft shipped an extension to its DOS operating system called the Microsoft Windows. So Microsoft Windows, which provided a UI and many of the same functions as Mac OS. The first Windows was really an operating environment running on top of MS-DOS, made to look like a single operating system. Now today's Windows is no longer based on DOS and it's full-fledged operating systems. Although Apple was 6 years ahead of Microsoft in offering a friendly GUI-based OS, Apple ultimately fell well behind Microsoft in sales because it chose not to license the Mac OS to outside hardware vendors. Now, numerous incarnations of operating system have come and gone since those days. Now, today, most and both Windows and Mac OS X are very similar in what they can do and how they do it. They have a wealth of features and drivers that make the original DOS look elementary. And their principal functions are unchanged. However, to provide an interface between the application programs and hardware, and to provide a user interface for basic functions such as file and disk management. Now,